For the people raised in a religious household, dogmas and beliefs are as natural and familiar as relatives, and must never dare to question the rules of the practices, but most important, its utility. But are religious beliefs truly relevant in this day and age? On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, causing the death of more than 1,000 people, one of the bloodiest strikes in the conflict, and an act that started the war in Gaza, which is still fought to this day. But besides the gruesome images of the attack, what called my attention the most were the reports of celebrations across the Muslim countries and the reactions across the Western hemispheres condemning the celebrations, classifying them as barbaric or inhumane, and also using this as a justification for the escalation of violence from Israel to the Palestinians. And when you start to think about it, it makes sense for most that celebrating the misfortune of somebody is not well received because it's frowned upon in our culture. But what if you are within a culture with a moral code dictated entirely by its religion? A religion which the scriptures quotes, "We will strike terror into the disbelievers' hearts because they attribute partners to God, although He has sent no authority for this. Their shelter will be the fire. How miserable is the home of the evildoers." Or, when the forbidden months are over, whenever you encounter the idolaters, kill them, seize them, besiege them, wait for them at every lookout post. Then rejoicing might feel like the right path of action after following the word of God, right? You might be quick to point that the problem lies in the fact that the teachings in the Quran incites the act of violence, and the Islam is a violent religion, but also in the Old Testament we can find passages like this. When it goes well with righteous, the city rejoices, and when the wicked perish, there are shouts of gladness. And it is true that the Bible includes other passages about the topic like, "Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles." But also the Quran has similar passages condemning rejoicing the misfortune of others, making the difference between the two more a case of how orthodox one religion is in comparison of the other. Or, in other words, how strict they are in the textual adherence to the interpretation. Contradictions in these holy books are nothing new. And I'm not bringing these to disqualify the teachings of the religions, but rather to ponder on the fact that both books were written in an entirely different time with a different social, cultural, and political landscape, and consider if we should still use them as moral compass to guide ourselves in present time, or if with the advancement of knowledge and technologies has rendered religion obsolete. It's undeniable that religions had a crucial role in the formation of the ancient civilizations, for good or bad, or even maybe both. The relation between the religious beliefs and the civilization in which proliferated is so intrinsic that it's difficult to tell them apart, and determine if the formation of a civilization was a consequence of the gathering of primitive humans united by the same religious belief, probably a deity embodying a natural phenomenon, and by doing this, providing the craved answers to the enigmas that primitive minds could not decipher. Recently, with the advent of neuroethology, neuroethologians argue that the structure and function of the human brain predisposes to believe in God, suggesting that the limbic system is dotted with God neurons and God neurotransmitters. Neurotheologians point that MRI scans show changes in the limbic structures like hypothalamus, amygdala, and hippocampus as research subjects engage in religious meditation. The rationale being that if thinking about God changes the way that the brain works, there must be some inherent neural imperative to believe in God in the first place. But this contrasts with the evolutionary perspective in which shared beliefs increase the cohesion within groups, becoming an advantage and increasing the likelihood of survival. In this case, considering the religion emerged as a survival mechanism in similar way that the emotion of loneliness is produced by their brains as a protection mechanism to encourage the individual to live in group to ensure survival in a hostile environment. But independently of how it came to be, shared primitive religious beliefs offer a moral construct for the proto-civilizations, establishing a frame of reference for accepted behaviors and generating taboos that will permeate in the cultures. Religious beliefs in the Paleolithic, even archaic and rudimentary, provided the basis for alignment to the social relationships and the semblance of order. And as it is described in the Old Testament, the first set of laws or commandments were not civic but religious in nature, with government and power conferred by religious beliefs. And from that point, until the flourishing of human thinking in Greece, with the emergence of philosophy, politics, and science, and through the Roman Empire, a subtle distinctions between the laws of man and the laws of God became more evident. With the civil laws focusing on the government, human relationships in society, government became less and less dependent from divine intervention, despite still being subjected to the whims of an emperor. Christianity, the fall of Rome during barbaric invasions, and the Dark Ages that followed, delayed any prospect to separate religion from state for centuries until modern times. However, even today, in the most developed and advanced countries, religion still plays a major role in collective decision-making. Having religious beliefs still embedded into the constitutions, country leaders still oathing with holy books, or using religious beliefs to justify public policies in social debates like abortion. So the question persists: do we in this day and age still need religious beliefs to govern the complex human iterations? As it mentioned, our ancestors attributed to a divinity a natural phenomenon that they could not explain, and by doing so, they made sense of the world they live in. With their more primitive psyches, it was comforting and less stressful to associate the lack of knowledge, even with fallacies. So these beliefs became crutches in the development of humanity. As humanity accrued knowledge in the cradle of civilization in Greece, philosophy and science changed the way that we see the world. Through philosophy, humans had the ability to ponder about morality, not from a religious perspective, but rather more from a humanistic perspective, despite still considering divine intervention on top as an ultimate source of causality. But this did not prevent philosophy to provide a more comprehensive moral compass than religions, even prior to the advent of Christianity. From its classical inception, philosophy will be transformed by multiple currents through the centuries, passing from rationalism and empiricism to idealism and finally to existentialism, before Friedrich Nietzsche could claim that God is dead, in reference to the decline of religion, in this case Christianity, as the accepted moral framework, considering that such beliefs could not provide the moral guidance needed for modern times. However, given its multifaceted nature of views and perspectives, philosophy rarely provides a straightforward answer or consensus, and demands a higher requirements of knowledge than religion, preventing it from widespread adoption by the masses, considering that it's mentally easier to abdicate the control of our life and destiny to a deity than taking the responsibility of finding our purpose in our quest for meaning in this life. On the other hand, collectively, we have built our codes of conduct, norms and statuses, improving from Roman law to adapt to the modern times, mostly on a trial and error basis, as societies became more culturally conscious about the role of humans living in society. With the laws becoming more humanistic after the separation of church and state, even when not entirely devoid from its religious heritage, laws have become the objective way to govern the most common human interactions. But having a law governing human interactions and philosophy on the other hand, trying to provide a solution to unethical dilemmas, the question is if there is a middle ground where everything can converge. As part of the business acumen for conflict resolution, one of the strategies is to find a common ground for both parties, and from there to reach agreements that can be acceptable by both. In the same way that mathematics is universal, science can be seen like the common ground in which all parties, regardless of country, culture, ethnicity, or religious beliefs, can find agreement when done right. It's true that science doesn't have all the answers, and not all the science are precise or perfect, but humanity has reached a knowledge maturity to ensure that the safest bet in most areas can be achieved following the scientific methods. It's kind of surprising that in this day and age of AI, decision-making in governments still considers religious and cultural beliefs. And I'm not saying this to ban religious perspective, but to ensure that the creation and implementation of public policies remains secular as means to represent everybody, not only left or right, but the whole spectrum. However, this might not be an easy task, considering that in the past, scientists and many specialists have been coaxed to deviate from the search of truth, which is science's prime directive, to push political, economical, or social agendas to favor the interests of a few. And this might be a good topic of discussion for another video, but for now, let's agree that despite the challenges to implement science-based decision-making in more aspects of our society, I believe it's still our safest bet as a civilization, because history has taught us that knowledge is a tool that can truly empower us as a species. Religious doctrines are a product of its time. Despite that some teachings can be timeless truth, paraphrasing millennium-old books to pass judgment to the entirely different reality we live today can be more harming than good. Religion had that role in our early civilizations, but as humanity, we have learned all its teachings across history. Humanity is now mature enough to use intellect developed and the knowledge accrued during thousands of years to tell good from wrong without the need of a deity. Religion was the crutches that we use as humanity to help us walk, but now we don't need them anymore. The crutches have become a burden we have to carry, and what is worse, one that we refuse to let go. We cling to religion even though it's dividing us. It makes us different. Religion segments us as a species, as if the borders of languages were not divisions enough. Coming back to the topic about the war in Gaza I mentioned at the start of this video, it's all about empathy, or the lack of empathy in this case. Empathy not only towards the suffering of others, but also for the ignorance of others. Because if you had born within one of those highly orthodox religions, would you know better? It's easy to speak from our place of freedom and religious relaxation, demanding to a group of people to renounce to their religious beliefs to solve an armed conflict, when we refuse to renounce to ours. And that is the reason why I renounced to Catholicism and have dedicated my time to study multiple religions and cultures since then, to eliminate the religious barrier, to be able to find my fellow humans in the middle of ground, and to be able to say to them, if I was capable to put aside all the beliefs I was indoctrinated since birth in pursuit of truth, you can too. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please share and subscribe to my channel. You can also visit my blog where you will find more articles addressing similar topics. Or if you enjoy thought-provoking literature, you might like my dark fantasy novel series as well. Links are in the description below. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.